Okay, everyone. Thank you, Chris. Next up, we have Tom Price. Tom is a principal civil engineer and hydrologist with the Conservation Design Forum. Prior to joining CDF in the summer of 2000, Tom had spent the previous decade working for the Northeastern Illinois Planning Commission as a civil hydrologist and a senior engineer in the Natural Resources Department. Prior to his tenure at NIPC, Tom had been employed by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers and is a private sector consultant. Over the years, Tom developed a strong reputation throughout the region as a highly proficient hydrologist and one of the leading proponents of sustainable water resource management practices. While at NIPC, Tom co-authored a manual on stormwater best management practices and conducted routine seminars that, at the time, were utilized as one of the primary stormwater educational resources around. This tool was used to train many of the region's civil engineers, landscape architects, planners, and builders on the benefits and techniques associated with sustainable water resource management strategies. And for my nugget about CDF, for more than 20 years, Conservation Design Forum has been at the forefront of the ecological design movement, implementing technologies and principles that have helped shape and influence public perception and policy regarding land use, preservation, restoration, and the benefits of mobilizing natural systems. Please join me in welcoming Tom Price.
Thank you, Kendall. Can you, yep, you can hear me, because I can hear me. Well, first of all, I want to say that I'm just honored to be here in such a distinguished crowd, and I've been impressed by both the presentations, but also the level of questions that I've heard from the audience, so that's very humbling in many ways. When I was asked to participate in this, and as I was preparing my talk, I was wondering what can I contribute to this conversation, and thinking about specifically strategies for collaboration. And you know, I work a lot with architects and planners and those folks, and I'm an engineer by background, and you know, the collaboration amongst the disciplines I think is really getting pretty good. But one of the things we see is the collaboration with our client, and working with the client to help them understand why ecological design, why incorporate ecology, why incorporate ecological principles into the design process. And we've got some clients that are fantastic. They've already drunk the Kool-Aid, they've taken the red pill, we don't need to really work that hard with them. But we've had other clients where they think about things differently. And in many ways, I would argue it's as or more important to be working with those kinds of people. If we're going to start moving the needle towards more sustainable design, we need to work not with our friends directly, but with the people that haven't taken the pill, so shall we say. And so that is what I wanted to talk about, and also thinking about, I heard a story the other day on public radio, and they were talking about the difference between liberals and conservatives, and that they come from very different sort of value systems. And when part of the polarization that we have today is because one group they try to make their argument in terms of things that are important to them and their value systems, but that just doesn't resonate with the people from across the aisle in many cases. And so we need to, if we're going to advance this dialogue, we need to think about speaking in terms that work with their value systems and how, why it's important to them. I can tell them all day long why I think, you know, we should save the planet, but that's really not what they're thinking about necessarily. So speak to it in things that are important to them. So starting with why. And so some of the things that, you know, in my world, working at a site design level are the things that we have to work with, and the things that affect the design process and affect what happens to the client. So regulations, policies, and incentives. As an engineer, regulations are something we deal with on a constant basis and have to work with. And so being able to meet those regulations is extremely important. Many clients are driven by sort of meeting those performance ratings under LEED and other sorts of things. That gold star is really important for them. And I don't want to demean the importance of LEED and other, because I think it's fantastic and it's really pushed the agenda. It's been great for our clients. But in the end, it kind of goes back to, third grade when you get that gold star, and a lot of people are after that. And other times, a consistency with the message that they're giving to the public, be it somebody that produces a product or otherwise, and they are trying to make a message to the public. It's important to help them reinforce their brand and help them deliver their product. And because really in the end, it's not about us, it's about they hire us to help them achieve their mission. And so helping them do that. And then sometimes it just comes down to money. How is this going to be a cost-effective project? But framing the economics, not just in terms of upfront cost, but life cycle costs and the other cost factors. And then finally, sort of related to cost is productivity, employee productivity and longevity. And maybe before I jump into this is probably something a lot of people know, but I think is really helpful when speaking with our clients in terms of why an integrated design process and why do we have all these consultants at these initial meetings when we just want to talk to the architect. And so this is a slide that friends of ours at Farr & Associates use all the time. I don't think it actually originated with them, but it's a really kind of nice graphic because in the beginning of and this is a timeline on the bottom, so very sort of the programming stage all the way through design and construction and even occupancy. And so in the beginning, we're really just drawing pictures, we're really just talking. So we can make big, bold design changes relatively easy, and we have the opportunity to have a great impact on the outcome of the project at that very early stage, and design changes really are nothing. But as we move further and further across that timeline, our ability to change the outcome, we're really just sort of tweaking around the edges, and it's very expensive to make design changes at that point. So it's important in the beginning to get all the disciplines involved. It's important to have the owner involved. It's important to have the owner's facilities staff involved because they're the ones that are going to be operating these facilities and managing the landscapes and even the users and or the employees in this process so that we can understand their needs. And so really sort of pushing that upfront process, and that's something a lot of others have talked about as well. So back to the why. Regulations are something, again, that are something we're working with all the time. And back before the crash of 2008, probably many of you are too young to remember that, but back in the day when I was started working, we had large developments, and they'd have big pipes leading to big ponds that held the stormwater and prevented flooding. And now, post-crash, it's all about really infill and redevelopment kinds of projects on much smaller sites, yet we still have to meet all of these same kinds of regulations. So looking for ways to make the site function more like an ecological system in that urban environment. So all of the surfaces really retaining and holding their water. So green roof systems and permeable paving systems and bioretention, so that essentially every surface is managing its own water to prevent the flooding downstream, prevent ecological degradation downstream. Another example of that, this is Chicago Public Schools is, they have some playgrounds. They have a lot of land. They have playgrounds that are almost 100% asphalt, and really no place for any child should really play or try to learn. But they really have no money to upgrade their playgrounds. On the flip side, we've got the Metropolitan Water Reclamation District of Greater Chicago, or MWRD, who is under consent decree to provide so many gallons of green infrastructure. And so they have money that they need to spend in order to put in the green infrastructure to better manage water. We also have the Chicago Department of Water Management, who's the stormwater agency for the city of Chicago, and they are charged with reducing flooding in the neighborhoods throughout Chicago. And again, so they have a mandate, they have money that they need to spend to reduce flooding, but neither one of those two agencies really have any land. So we put the agency or the organization that has land, Chicago Public Schools, but not a lot of money, with the other two agencies that need to spend some money but don't have land, and we can build these wonderful playgrounds that hold water. And so all of the paving, these are all permeable paver systems. The water moves through them. The playgrounds are permeable surfaces. The turf areas are permeable surfaces, and all the water gets held underneath and can infiltrate into the ground or be slowly released to the sewer system to reduce that load on the sewers. This site is Grissom Elementary School, and there's no discharge off of this site up to about a 2-year event. So very highly functioning from a water management perspective, yet provides great playgrounds for the kids. The lead rating system, again, I can't overemphasize the importance of this in terms of motivating many clients in terms of wanting to do higher levels of performance of their systems. And LEED, in many ways, focused a lot on buildings. We as site people, landscape architects, civil engineers, we're about the site, and so the Sustainable Sites Initiative has been a great addition to the process to provide another rating system that is more focused on the site. And then certainly the Living Building Challenge. In most cases, if the client hasn't already drank the Kool-Aid, they're probably not going after Living Building Challenge, but still it's important. We have clients that want to be transformative, but they don't always know what that actually means and how to get there. And so it's still really important to have that collaborative process and them engaged so that they understand the implications of that high level of performance in terms of the different ways that they're going to manage their site, their buildings, et cetera. Then we have other groups, Vital Farms. Certainly, LEED was important. This is applying and will achieve LEED Gold, but that wasn't the main thing for them. For them, they're really pushing the sustainable farming end of it. And they've got this hilarious video, you can see it on YouTube, about the difference between pasture-raised and cage-free chickens, and how pasture-raised is the much higher level of sustainability in terms of farming. And so they wanted to make sure that their site and their facility was consistent with the message that they're putting out to the public. And so protected woodlands in here, all the surfaces are permeable again. We were working with biohabitats on looking at treating some of the wastewater on the site and potentially using it as part of the facility. That part is still a little uncertain at this point, but they've really done a lot here, and it was all about that message to the public and being a consistent message. As a learning institution, this is part of Goshen College. It is part of their environmental studies program. They have a retreat institute, and if they, when they wanted a facility that was consistent with what they were trying to teach their students. And so all on-site wastewater treatment, held all of the stormwater on the site, restored the wetland edges along this existing lake, and even on-site power generation. So again, consistency between what they're saying and what they're doing. And then again, the economic benefits. And we work a lot with architects and building engineers and the mechanical, electrical, plumbing engineers. And this is Johnson Controls in Wisconsin, and they make control systems for lighting and HVAC systems, et cetera. And so they wanted to walk the walk. And so we did a lot of site things here, but the thing I wanted to talk about is the, they put in, this is actually the largest private solar panel facility in the state of Wisconsin, and so there was some upfront costs that went with installing that system, but greatly reduced their operational costs because they're on-site power generation. And when you're talking about energy, it's kind of easy to do that math because there's the cost to put in the panels, you have an electric bill, and so it's a pretty clear connect the dots. When we get to sites, it's a little tougher there in terms of connecting those dots. We don't, we don't pay, there's not sort of that avoided cost necessarily directly. But what we do, and a lot of clients will be hyper-focused on that upfront construction cost, and so what we try to talk to them about is the life cycle cost, the reduced maintenance, the longevity of some of these systems, and so those first and last columns. But the other part that is really important is this sort of site utilization piece. Again, as we're looking at more urban development, more urban redevelopment, if you can't fit your program on the site, you're buying a larger property or you're putting less program on the site. So by using these ecologically based systems that are better for the environment, but also are much more space efficient, it makes sense for them from an economic perspective. And a good example of that, this is at the city of Ann Arbor. This was their sort of police station at the time. And they needed to add a courts building to this, they needed a new courts building. So one option was build it somewhere else and buy some land, build a courts building, but they really wanted the two facilities together, and so they could end up moving both facilities, but instead essentially just added the courts building to the site, sort of densifying the site, but we still needed to meet all the sort of regulations for the site. And so all of the surfaces on here, there's green roof systems, all of both the vehicular and the pedestrian paving is all permeable paving. All of the landscapes are water absorbing landscapes. And just a couple of photos of that. Again, all of the pedestrian vehicular paving is permeable. All of the landscapes are bioretention areas, and the city of Ann Arbor even has a percent for art program, meaning that every project in the city, whether it be private or public, has to spend a certain amount on bringing art into these projects. So kind of melding those budgets together, we looked at how we manage the rainwater in the site to do that in a very artful way so that we could start to engage actually some of that art budget into some of the designs of our functional systems on the project. And then thinking about that human productivity and efficiency and making really for nicer places for people, biophilia. And there's all kinds of studies that show, if we take a look at the cost, you spend a lot of money in the building, you spend a lot of money on the site, but for most businesses, their number one cost is staff. And so the more productive your staff is, the lower, the higher retention rates of your staff and the lower sort of sick leave and those sorts of things, you can directly affect the bottom line. And so looking at design for that. And Kresge Foundation was a perfect example of that. This is located in Troy, Michigan. This is so right here was the historic farmhouse for the Kresge family. But over the years, that farmhouse had been surrounded by a very extremely large shopping mall and asphalt parking lots. And so they had employees that were working here, but it was hard to retain employees. They didn't like working at that facility, and a lot of it had to do with the surroundings that were there. And so when they expanded the facility, looked at how can we, even in this really tight space, and how can we make this a more attractive place to live, and really looking at biophilic principles. So first thing was really kind of pushing the building down into the site, and then constructing all native landscapes surrounding the building, putting in naturalized ponds around the conference buildings, and making sure that every single office had views to nature despite being completely surrounded by asphalt parking lot and shopping mall. And so with that, I guess I just wanted to close with, again, we're all getting really pretty good at working together as disciplines and collaborating as the various disciplines. And now it's really, important to start spreading the message to, again, those that are not already on board, but to those that maybe aren't on board, in helping to make this more of the norm rather than the exception. Thank you.
All right, now if you weren't with us this morning, this is the all exciting part where I invite you to the living room and we have a little bit of chat with our audience.